presentation and progress report on homeless outreach program. May I have a staff report?
Good evening, Mayor, Todd, and Council. I am Darren Upstall, Commander. I am in charge of our homeless and code enforcement unit. I want to speak in a partnership with CityNet and to speak, give you an update on how CityNet and the police department are working in collaboration with the homeless issues in our city and how we are taking, we've always taken a proactive approach, but how we are trying to increase that proactive approach. Currently, we have one dedicated homeless liaison officer, HOLO officer, and available patrol officers. We realize that our one dedicated homeless liaison officer is not enough. We need help, and we've got the assistance from our patrol officers to buy into this program. We partnership with CityNet, and you'll hear from them later. We work with we have the Homeless Prevention Rapid Rehousing Program, obviously the Westminster Family Resource Center, and we have worked on projects with Garden Grove, Orange County Sheriff's Department, Huntington Beach, Buena Park, and Garden Grove doing sweeps throughout the city over the last 6 months. Here's just a little bit of a look in calls for service, that how it affects Westminster. You'll see the timeline from April. That was close to just after the riverbed cleared out in February of 2018, and we saw a steady increase. And you're probably looking at January 19th, up to that point, why there was 281 calls for service. That's because we've increased self-initiated activity done by our officers. That means we are going out actively and contacting homeless people, trying to get them assistance, or if they are in violation of any municipal codes or health and safety codes or law, that we are proactively going after them. But again, we're trying to provide services. So that's why that number is kind of high. And again, same thing, hours spent on homeless calls for service, 1,669. There were 60,421 calls for service between April 2018 and January 2019, and a little over 4% was homeless related.
Wow.
This is a kind of a GIS, Global Information System mapping, which shows the calls for service in our city and how it breaks down in the different areas throughout there. That's up to August of 2018. I'm sorry, yes, of August of 2018. Homeless context. This is a big thing that we've been doing and working in conjunction with different agencies. Huntington Beach, like I spoke about earlier, Buena Park, Garden Grove from the Sheriff's Department. We have increased the amount of sweeps that we've done. You may have seen some of the special items that we've sent out on some of the hours that we've put in. We are currently running 1 to 2 sweeps per month with officers, with CityNet, with Public Works, have been a huge help, with our code enforcement unit also, going out there and making contacts. As a result of that, you can see that we've had 281 contacts, 42 arrests, 51 citations, 57 field identification cards were completed, and four joint, that's actually 6 now, 6 joint projects with City Yard have been conducted. Okay, some of the parks that we receive the most calls for service, you can see there how it's broken down. I believe Cascade Park is about 43% of the calls for service over there are homeless related. And again, that just gives you a rough breakdown of what the calls for service at the parks are that's related to homelessness and or transients. Case study. This is an example of a case study that we had. Client A has been homeless for over 15 years. We had numerous chronic health issues. He was an alcoholic. He was linked to Long Beach, the VA hospital, the Volunteers of America, Orange County Health Care Agency, and Adult Protective Services. During the 15 years of the subject being homeless, 68 police reports were generated, 6 arrests, 26 FI cards, and 16 citations. In the last 6 months, we responded to 70 calls for service with that individual, 20 plus medical transports to different facilities, and 3 hazmat calls for service. And in August of 2016, in August 16th, 2018, we were able to place client A at Kramer Place with the assistance of CityNet. So it's not as easy as just simply placing somebody in a facility. There's a lot of hours and it come in, and CityNet was going to speak to that about this incident. And again, there's some pictures. We participated in the McFadden and Gothard Bridge cleanup. Also, the Newland and 405 cleanup also. Again, more pictures from the Newland and 405 cleanup. And let me go to, and so at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Brad Fieldhouse, who's our CityNet contact, and he's going to come up and speak. And there he is, regarding our partnership with them.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for letting us come and update. Before I kind of jump into this, I just do want to do a thank you for council members and city staff that helped pull off the countywide point-in-time count. That happened last month. That's an important event that happens that sort of speaks to sort of the reality is this is a countywide challenge, but it's also a regional challenge. So the reality is that while Westminster is doing a great job sort of making sure that it's doing due diligence to take care of its homeless neighbors, the reality is it is a regional problem. And so some of the challenges that things like the point-in-time count point to is sort of how the county and resources should be spent regionally. So I commend you for your participation in that and appreciate it from both volunteering, helping to raise supplies. We did have a count team that went out in the city here, and all the volunteers were local, so appreciate that. And we are going to connect with the McKinney-Vento. We've already made that connection. We'll reach out to the McKinney-Vento liaison from the school district. That was just brought up from a recent speaker, and we've already made that connection. This is a dashboard that there we go. Dashboard that we sort of continue to sort of kind of at a high level sort of monitor our success, show the progress towards solutions. The number at the graph on the bottom right hand is the number since since April of 2017, we've been able to have 148 people exit the streets from Westminster here. The third bullet down that you can see, it's real small writing, apologize for that, says that HUD gives classification. So when somebody gets off the streets, there are a number of categories, about 30, that we have to classify each one of those street exits according to one of those categories. Some are considered permanent, assuming that they maintain that program, whatever that would be, and some are considered temporary, like an emergency shelter. 46% of the individuals that we've exited from the streets here after case management have gone into permanent situations. Currently, we have about 40 cases that we're actively working, where we're actively engaged with folks that are out on the streets. Just for sake of context, our contract since we started here is a 40-hour-a-week contract. So we spend about 40 hours a week. We have 2 dedicated caseworkers. I'll introduce you to Sophia. She's here tonight. I'm going to have her tell a story of success. We hired her and brought her right on board here. We also, because of some of the recent activity and the uptick in our partnership with some of the collaborative efforts, we've also brought in an intern that's now working with us, not in these hours, but we bring that intern with us from Cal State Fullerton. But you can see the balance of sort of what we do on a week-by-week basis. This will sort of give you a picture of sort of what it looks like to do homeless outreach here in the city. We obviously are spending about 8 hours a week, staff hours with law enforcement. Currently, we go out every Monday morning, and then our team does follow up throughout the week, although that does vary, sort of based on different strategies and approaches and hotspots. We will sometimes do it in the evening, so we sort of mix that up just to sort of make sure that we're kind of going to certain areas, different times of the day, in fact. But we also are involved in special projects. You saw some of those on there, where we sort of make sure that we do outreach before a sweep. We'll do outreach to make sure that those that are interested in services can get the help that they need, as well as case management with existing clients that we follow up with. We're on call with the Family Resource Center. We also, just when we get people housed, we actually then, some of our hours, depending on the week, go to actually visiting those, our friends, our homeless neighbors that get housed, just to make sure that they stay housed, so that their housing situation continues to remain stable, making sure they get, medical not services, but, make sure they get their health care coverage, make sure they have whatever they would need for job applications, those kinds of things. We also attend, that's a typo in the PowerPoint, but we attend the Garden Grove, Westminster, and Stanton Interfaith Coalition. We attend those, and we're active members of that conversation to make sure that we're connecting with some of the various faith community groups here in the community. All the way down to, quarterly meetings with law enforcement. This is one of the things that's sort of matured over the past 6 to 12 months, where we're now sitting down on a quarterly basis and we're sort of kind of checking in on our progress. How's it working over here? Are there certain hot spots that have popped up that for whatever reasons, and we're sort of beginning to sort of work with law enforcement to sort of kind of focus our energies, so we're sort of giving the highest and best use of our time and energy to the places where it's needed the most. In April of 2017, we did a census, which is different than a point-in-time count. A point-in-time count is a HUD-required mandate, but it does not produce a by-name list. It's statistically important. It affects millions of dollars, but it does not provide a list of names. Every year for you guys, we have done that census, and in April of 2017, we did a census. We reported on that previously. We identified 126 individuals over a couple days, where we went out late in the evenings, bumped into people living in cars, talked to sort of the folks we know on a regular basis. We identified 126 individuals. 75% of those, again for context, 75% of those expressed Westminster connections. Family, grew up here, went to school here, last permanent residence was here, those sorts of things that sort of say these are sort of, they consider this their home, even though they are unhoused. Of note, 25% of those homeless were actually considered homeless for more than 6 years. So one of the unique challenges as we sort of look at this county-wide that Westminster faces is you have a significant chronic homeless population, meaning they've been here a while. And I think that would attest to sort of, we've heard that sort of narrative around the city. So-and-so has lived here for a long time. I've seen that guy for so many years homeless here. And that just presents some unique challenges when you start to talk to some of these individuals. It's client A, because law enforcement used that as a case study, I wanted to just kind of point to some of the challenges with this particular individual. And it's not my business or our business to sort of talk about who this person is, but you heard the case study a minute ago. We met this person our first week here, and we have been spending 1 to 4 hours a week since the beginning of our conversations and our time here with this individual. Sometimes that has actually been a pretty, at certain points of opportunity, I'll say it that way, where there seems to be clarity and a desire to move forward. Some weeks we've actually spent up to 20 hours just on this one individual case, really sort of helping him to overcome some of the hurdles that he's facing. A lot of that is due to his chronic nature. He's been homeless for so long, there's so many hurdles that are required to sort of stay on top. So the reality, it's been great to work with law enforcement. In this case, a lot of first responders, fire and rescue, who would be cheering on this guy's success because they've spent so much time invested in his health. Just an incredible story of sort of what it takes sometimes with folks that are experiencing great challenges. I'm going to introduce you to my colleague, Sophia. She's going to share a little story. She's been working here for over a year. Brought on board for Westminster. She works here in Stanton, so she kind of works the folks, the area right around here. And she's going to tell another story of another situation to give a little bit more context.
Hi. So we first met this client. They were a referral through the Westminster Family Resource Center. She came to the center because she was desperate. She needed help. She was sleeping in the car with her 3 kids. It had been about 1 or 2 weeks. She left an abusive situation. So she went there and asked for help. They immediately called us. We came out and met with them. We completed intake and we interviewed her. And right away we called family organizations that provide transitional housing. And we were able to get her an interview the next day. So she went to the interview. They notified us that they didn't have any availability until the next week. So we were able to bridge her and her family. So we were able to make sure they were housed for the next couple days until they were able to enter that program. After entering that program, she was able to stay there for 30 days, save up money, finish school. She was in school at the time for nursing, and work as well part-time. So she was working, going to school, and had 3 kids. After she finished that program, she was able to get into her own apartment. And recently we were at an event for people experiencing homelessness, and one of our sitting at employees ran into her, and she said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you guys know that City Net really helped me, and now I work for this organization that works with the homeless as well, and she's a nurse." So she's doing really well. She has her own place, and she wanted to be here tonight, but she couldn't because she is working. So thank you.
Yeah. It's always great to hear those kind of stories. I also wanted you to meet Sophia. She's been running around, and a lot of people are recognizing her, but she's a real person working out on the streets here. She knows most of these folks on a first-name basis, along with a lot of law enforcement agencies. So when it all kind of comes together just like that, and you can sort of, particularly with a mom and 3 kids, I mean, can you believe that those things exist? You know, it's great outcomes. Last slide is just as a family resource center. Again, that just sort of speaks to the synergy that's been building here. We consider it to be a privilege to be part of the solution. We recognize that there's a lot of components working here. And when it works, as this net story just illustrated, where somebody shows up at a family resource center who's actually homeless, because if they're not homeless, then there's other resources that get tapped into, citywide here as well as the family resource center. But if they are homeless, immediately refer to us, and based on those partnerships that have developed, you begin to see success happen as each person plays their role. So we're privileged to be a part. We'll stick around if there's any other questions. Thank you.
Question. I remember when I first introduced you to Westminster years back, there was a bit of a challenge because, one, we've never had services like yours, and I know that a number of cities like Garden Grove, Stanton, Anaheim, Buena Park were all participating in this effort. So I just want to thank you for sticking around and finding your groove with the police department. I know they've had some programs initially, and I know it was a bit of a learning curve to kind of find that synergy, but I believe that you found it. I've noticed the activity in terms of the proactive approach to homeless population. I mean, in a humane way. I think that we've been really professional and at times have to be a little bit assertive. But I think I just want to thank each and one of you for all you do to really serve these people, because again, they're humans and they need a place to stay. And I think that I'm just really happy to see that synergy. And I just have more of a question of the 1,119 contacts. How many of those were actual families that I'm sure that you don't see much of those, but like the story you shared, which is an impactful story, but how many of those are families in Westminster?
I think I could actually give you the exact. So, do you know how many of your current caseload are families? Do you have that answer?
Current, I'd say
Between 6 and 8 of our current caseloads are family situations currently. No, I don't have that number. Yeah, I'm looking at our data here, and I don't see that breakdown.
Well, the reason I ask is that I know that you have a great contact with county services, and I just want to see if there's anything that we can do at the city level to help. I mean, first and foremost, when you have family, children, you know, that's a totally different case. And I know that you guys do. There's wraparound services and ways to kind of get these people back on track. So I'm wondering if there's anything that the city can do or that's missing that would help some of these families get back on track.
I think if there was one thing, and I don't know the details of this, and because I'm not part of any of these conversations, but I know part of, and someone had alluded to it earlier, of some of the money that's coming down. There's sort of some emergency funds that are coming down regionally from the state.
Okay.
There's also SB $2 that are going to be coming out and allocated to the city. So I do think that any sort of partnership, one of the challenges we have here in Central SPA, which is the 9 cities in central Orange County that are sort of worked together in a service provision region. I think any sort of, you know, on the one end is the need for emergency shelters. I mean, we obviously have the courtyard that we can refer people here to. But that's a 425 bed shelter in Santa Ana. That's full.
Wow.
So there's 425 people, no kids, that are there every single night. Santa Ana just opened another one, and I know there's some other conversations. So any sort of partnership with other cities, I would look for ways to partner with other cities so that we can consolidate and work together, whatever that would mean. I would definitely go there. And then on the macro end, on permanent supportive housing, which is housing with wraparound care, there's an important, I don't know what Westminster's connection to it would be, but I know there is a countywide effort led by the United Way to build enough permanent supportive housing units. So as allocation of dollars come through, I would consider appropriate sized, shared percentage, whatever that would look like. That would make sense. I don't know where Westminster as a city is in that conversation, but I know I would encourage that, because that is a direct way to get people from the streets into permanent supportive housing.
Great.
And anywhere in between. We need more of everything is the reality.
Thank you.
25% of the homeless population in the U.S. now lives in California, and we are number one with the population growing.
That's amazing. And one more question, and I guess the question will be directed to Commander Epstein. Is it Commander? I know we have certain shopping centers that have become sort of the hot spots and the gravitational pull for some of these, for this population. One, for example, would be the one on the corner of Trask and Beach, which is 7-Eleven. And they're very active there. I know I take my son to get his haircut at Supercuts, and the hair doctor is like, hey, what do we do? This guy won't leave the front. He keeps smoking his cigarettes, and smoke keeps coming in my place. And he leaves and he comes back, and they sort of rotate. And in those cases, what can the city do, or what are we doing to work with these property owners so that I don't know if it's our responsibility to get them to deal with this population, or is it the property managers?
I think it's a little bit of both. It's our job to educate them on the laws and what they can do. And a lot of times they're in fear of any type of retaliation. They don't want to confront them out there because at times they can be confrontational. But I think it's important, and what we've done, what our agency has done, is we identify 4 or 5 areas at a time that, and the one you're speaking of is one of the areas that we've identified, that we see an increase in homeless there, and if the crime rate's high too. So what we do is we educate the property owners, the business owners, regarding what can they do. So trespass warnings, we can go by and contact them. It's essential that they have trespass warnings on site, which advises of the 602, which is the penal code for trespassing. We just created a new form that we'll be passing out to community members on trespassing. So if they're not there in the middle of the night and we run across this issue, that there is a form where we can effectively arrest for trespassing on their property. Our officers are taking the initiative to contact business owners, not only for what we've spoken about as environmental issues. So if there's an environmental thing where it's making it easier for the homeless to congregate in an area, well, and so think about removing that as part of the problem, which makes it a little bit easier for us to enforce laws or to see when they're hiding and things like that. So we're going out and talking to business owners. We've worked with Walmart. We've worked with Costco. And again, sometimes it's only a temporary fix, and we realize that, if you move them out of point A and they go to point B, they're going to come out back to point A. It just happens. But the thing is, we have to be diligent and continue our efforts and keep going. And I think you are right. I think we are making a difference over the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
And we got to continue to push forward. But we encourage those business owners to call us because we can educate them. If they don't call, we don't know all the time. And that's important that we know that.
All right, thank you.
Vice Mayor Hall?
Can I have a question real quick? Commander, does the police department have any pamphlets, any literature that educate business owner how to deal with the homeless?
Not right now, but part of that is the trespass form that we have, because that's one of the biggest things that we get is that, with that form that we just created, that gives us some more fuel to enforce laws with them and stuff like that.
Well, I understand the 602 part,
Right.
the trespassing part, has to be posted or sign or whatever.
Right.
But the majority of businesses in Westminster, they have no idea how to deal with homeless people. And just like you say, for fear of retaliation, maybe the police department should have some type of literature that we
Right.
can, at the lobbying at the PD or we can pass it out to the business owner.
Right. We could look into that, and we can also hold like a hearing, or not a hearing, I'm sorry, like a neighborhood watch community meeting where maybe we can educate some of the business owners, invite them in and say, hey, these are the issues that you come across. This is how we can deal with it. We're working with CityNet to help these people also, because I'm sure that a lot of the business owners don't know anything about CityNet.
Oh, they're very fearful. They're extremely fearful of retaliation because
Absolutely.
that's a place of their doing business. So
Right. And we encourage them to call, because if they don't call, we don't know all the time.
exactly. Thank you.
All right, Vice Mayor Ho?
Okay, while you're at the podium anyway, I'm going to ask you first, I know you dedicate one full-time person?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that enough? Is that person busy?
Well, they're extremely busy.
Extremely
And so because of our staffing issues right now, which we're dealing with, is one enough? Well, no. But so how we've dealt with that is we've incorporated our patrol officers to be part of the solution and help out too. And we've created this thing called Directed Patrol Enforcement Details, which again identifies 4 to 5 different areas at a time. And we put like a month time frame on it, because if you go any further than a month, then you kind of forget about it and stuff. So we put a timeline, we put it out there. We require our officers, not just our homeless liaison officer, but our officers to make contact, to do patrol checks, and to document that. So if we pull it, the information after a month, we can see what type of impact that we're making. And again, that's why we've increased the amount of sweeps that we've done. We used to do them once every 3 or 4 months. Now we're doing them once to twice a month for that, and I think it's making a difference right now.
Okay. And in regards to, and a question for both of you, do you see, what is the main problem? Do you see opioid addicts addiction as a problem? Is that a
Absolutely.
huge?
Any type of drug, but opiates, prescription pills, opiates, anything else like that is a problem with the homelessness.
And what percentage would you say contribute to homelessness?
Honestly, with homelessness, I think it's still alcohol. It's still one of the main drugs that's being abused and stuff. I don't have a percentage regarding.
Thank you. I have a question for CityNet. My question is, out of the 1,100, is it 19 people? Now, I know I posed this question a couple of years before when you first came on board, and I don't think you knew the answer then. But what would be the percentage of the people, the homelessness, these are all homeless people, what percentage do not want to be helped?
Yeah.
Do you have that answer today, you think?
I could, so if from a data standpoint, so we did the flood control channel where we were clearing out there, and we actually interviewed, our average number, including that one, I know that one off the top of my head because I just read it today. Our experience would be is that about 80, well, I'll get the exact number for the flood control channel, so the 400 to 700 people, we interviewed 422 of them, and of those, 82.3% said, get me out of here. So that would be up to 18% roughly. That would be what we would consider consistent across the board, is that you've got sort of, the way I kind of describe it, just at sort of a real high level, is sort of there's a 10%, no matter what we did, they would not be interested. They sort of are choosing that as a lifestyle. The other 90% is just the level of complication of their homelessness. Now that's, if you get them alone, separate, and you really are talking to them, and you say, and you really can build up that rapport and that trust. So that wouldn't be maybe your first brush, or if someone else in a uniform asked that question. But when you get down to it, it's about 75 to 80% of the people who said, if I had an option, that's not just a mat and a shelter, but if you really could help me, I would get me out of here. This is not what I had to do. And then, so I would say the answer to your first question is the reason why homelessness in California is going through the roof, and we are leading the way of all 50 states, we're number one. 25% of the homeless population is in California. It's not because they're coming from other places. It's because of the housing prices. So it's an economic challenge. The reality is we're competing when we're trying to get somebody who has a voucher to get into a 1-bedroom unit. We're competing with Cal State Long Beach and UCI graduates for that same apartment. Yeah. And the cost of living is outrageous, actually. So those kind of hurdles, and then sort of, then when you, if I sort of sit, If I was a homeless individual, I would have an alcohol problem, I promise you, because it is not a way to live, and it is rough. And nobody grows up and says, I'm going to live in a tent and down by the freeway. And so that sort of economic hurdle, that's why when we, sometimes the best money we could spend is that first and last month rent to get somebody into a unit. That is the best money we could spend, or a drug rehab program or any of those sorts of things. So I would say about 80%. Once you build that trust, I would say that's the number.
All right, so about 20%. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Doe?
I have a question for you, sir. You're saying that the reason for us to lead the nation in homeless because of the housing crisis it's very expensive. So where do you get that study? I thought it used to be like the mental health aspect of that caused people to become homeless. This is new to me, so I'd like to know that where you get that.
Yeah, I can point you
statistic.
to a study, the one that I'm quoting to, but the United Way and UC Irvine did a study a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. They did a groundbreaking study, and you can find it at UnitedWayOC, I think .org/resources. They did a cost study. It's actually sort of a gripping analysis. It sort of is built on how much money is it costing us to manage people while they're homeless. So they have a summary. It's about 8 pages long, and then a big long report. If you really are having a tough time sleeping, you could read that one. But they have an executive summary that lists, based on an analysis, a groundbreaking analysis in Orange County, first one done, cost analysis on homelessness. I would highly recommend that one, because it sort of speaks to the fundamental questions. It gives dollar amounts. It is very robust to your question.
Yeah, I have never heard you or the commander mention about mental health regarding to the homeless problem. But I love to see that study. So would you be so kind, send me a copy of that if you, or the link?
To be fair, that's number one is the economic, but there are mental health, I believe, is number 4, and that is a growing challenge, particularly with chronic populations, which is probably true here, because when you become chronic, where you are for more than a year or multiple episodes over multiple years that add up to a year, you start to develop a lot of conditions that are of the kind we're talking about that create incredible challenges. I will send you that link.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
I'd like to,
Do we have any? Oh,
I'd like to
please.
make a motion to receive and file
Second?
item number
second, okay.
5.2.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion
Thank you.
and a second to receive and file item 5.2. Vote, please.
That motion carried 5-0 to receive and file the presentation.
All right.